Thanks for joining us for another edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Mitchell Ringos. Well, one person is dead after a house fire in Pekanjikam First Nation on Tuesday morning. 11 others, including children, were safely evacuated from the home. It's the second fatal house fire to devastate the remote community this year. Chief Shirley Keeper credits the quick actions of local peacekeepers and firefighters for saving so many lives. Ottawa and the province have reached a historic food claim settlement with two First Nation communities. It's a $157 million agreement with Big Grassy and the Ojibways of Onigaming First Nations. Carl Langdon has the details.
The historic flooding problems on the Big Grassy and Ojibways of Onigaming First Nations dates back to the late 1800s, when two dams were built on Lake of the Woods, causing the communities to lose lands to floodwaters.
It was a long journey to reach a fair, just final settlement.
A $157 million settlement between the communities, Ottawa, and the province of Ontario was marked at the Athabasca Ojibwe Heritage Park on Wednesday. Ontario Indigenous Affairs Minister Greg Rickford took part in the signing ceremony.
Well, it's an important step in reconciliation. Far too often these kinds of claims have taken too long. Our government, under the leadership of Premier Ford, is committed to making sure that we sign off on these claims and we move forward.
No representatives from the federal government were on hand. Chief Lynn Indian of Big Grassy and Chief Jeffrey Copenis of the Ojibways of Onigaming acknowledged the importance of this settlement, but Copenis notes that there are still issues that continue to threaten his community, that senior levels of government have failed to adequately address.
So again, we're begging Minister Rickford while he's here today to help us. We need safe, sober crisis beds. We need infrastructure in Onigaming, not in Kenora, not in Fort Francis. We need it right in our First Nation communities, and we're just not seeing that help coming right now. So we're determined. We're determined to use some investments from this flooding agreement to do the work ourselves, to save the young people ourselves, to treat them themselves.
Still, he acknowledges that this is a first step.
We have an opportunity to work together, from safe crisis beds to safe injection sites to regulated, legalized drugs. We have an opportunity to save lives, and that's what I hope that the minister has heard from my remarks today.
Copenis is also calling for the peaceful occupation of Kenora's Anishinaabe Park next year, honoring the 1972 protest regarding the mistreatment of Indigenous peoples in Canada, and which brought awareness of industrial mercury contamination in the region. The health consequences of that contamination are still being felt today. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
Operations will continue for three First Nations police services, which had their funding run out at the end of March. A federal judge has ordered the government to extend the funding for 12 months, criticizing Public Safety Canada for failing to act honorably in its negotiations. Funding talks broke down between Canada and the police services, including Anishinaabe and Treaty 3 police, which refused to accept the government's terms and conditions. The ruling also removes the obligation to comply with the offending clauses in the First Nations Inuit policing program. OPP say a 23-year-old man has died at Silver Falls Provincial Park. Police received a report around 3:45 Monday afternoon that someone had fallen into the Kaministiquia River at Silver Falls. Thunder Bay Fire Rescue and EMS located the man's body in the water. He had reportedly gone to the area with a small group of people to swim. And according to the Tribune, an online news source in India, the deceased had come to Thunder Bay from that country to study at Lakehead University. A 28-year-old has been arrested at the KI First Nation Airport, charged with trafficking cocaine from Thunder Bay into the remote community. Ontario Provincial Police also searched a KI home as part of the investigation and found cocaine, cash, a firearm with ammunition, prohibited alcohol, and an ATM. The accused is charged with trafficking and weapons offenses and has been remanded into custody. 3 boil water advisories in the Northwest Angle 33 First Nation were lifted recently, and Patty Haidu, Minister of Indigenous Services in Fednor, was in the region this week to mark that occasion and make a number of funding announcements. The federal government invested $19 million in a water treatment plant at the First Nations Angle Inlet site, which is now providing clean water to roughly 100 residents there on Thursday. Well, on Thursday, Haidu announced $5 million in funding from an Indigenous health lodge and domestic violence shelter in Fort Francis. She also announced just over $1.6 million in Fednor funding for 8 other initiatives across 6 municipalities. The Township of Ignace has a full council once again, 3 months after the mayor and deputy mayor resigned in a fog of controversy. 2 new councillors have been appointed to fill the vacant seats. Lee Noonan has more.
Ignace's newest councillors, former police officer Wayne Menier and former postmaster Janet Lett, were sworn in as councillors only minutes after council voted to appoint them.
I'm so excited for the choices that we made. Mr. Menier commented teamwork. That really hit home for me, and I know Janet will work really good with us as well.
Menier and Lett were the highest scoring candidates from a pool of 6 who applied through an unconventional process that involved council evaluations of written and verbal submissions. But interim mayor Kim Bakery says she'd made up her mind to support the 2 candidates before ever seeing the scores.
We were told that we can either go by the score or we can choose who we would like to work with. And that is what I did. I was shocked when I seen the scores.
Menier received unanimous support from all 3 council members. As a relative newcomer, he wasn't expecting to get through, but says he was drawn by the challenge.
There's a long-term challenge here for the council to get things on track, and prior to me moving here, I was hearing stories of the nuclear waste storage facility maybe coming here. It's not the only place that it was entertaining, and that piqued my interest because you want to see things done right.
Lett's appointment was endorsed by Bakery and Councillor John Taddeo. Lett was the next runner-up in last October's election. She's anticipating a very exciting time on council.
I've lived in Ignace since 1971, obviously very invested, and would like to be part of the exciting chances and opportunities going forward. We're going to have a strong team, I believe, and there's many projects on the go and many more that can get going.
Bakery says she's eager to get down to work with the new councillors.
Yeah, I believe this council is going to work together, take this municipality in the direction we need to go.
Council's next scheduled meeting is on July 17th. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
And that wasn't the only big news out of Ignace this week, as council also received a report reprimanding its former mayor for his actions while in office. We'll have that story after the break. Welcome back, and like we were saying before the break, in Ignace, details have emerged regarding an alleged altercation back in March between a councillor and the town's former mayor. The incident left citizens grasping for answers, some of which have come from a recent Ministry of Labour investigation. Lee Noonan has more.
An independent investigation ordered by the Ministry of Labour, the results of which were recently presented to Ignace Council, paints an unflattering picture of former Mayor Bill Gascon at a meeting back on March 10th.
He yelled, he swore, he used profanity, he abruptly left the meeting, an outburst of anger, violently pushing the table away and kicking the chair into the wall before storming out of the room. Those actions breached the code of conduct. And importantly, those are not the actions of a municipal leader that can be condoned.
Gascon categorically denies the findings of the report and refused to participate in the process, citing a lack of trust in the investigators. The investigation also looked into Gascon's accusation that Councillor John Taddeo grabbed him by the arm in the same meeting, but the report clears Taddeo, calling his testimony and that of the town clerk credible. It recommends a reprimand for the former mayor and training for all councillors.
And we are here today undoubtedly because members did not understand their roles and the standards of behavior.
The firm Principles Integrity was hired to conduct the investigation. It also serves as integrity commissioner for the township.
We've tried to assist council in governance matters, but regretfully, much of our time has been in dealing with complaints. We have a matrix of complaints which we are attempting to deal with in a rational way, a way that achieves course correction and sets the municipality up for being better able to meet its governance goals down the road.
The firm has no timeline for the results of those other investigations. Interim Mayor Kim Bagree declined to comment on this matter for now. Council is expected to review the report and vote on the recommendations on July 17th at its next regular meeting. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Greenstone needs to increase its housing stock by 20% in order to meet growing demand. That's according to a recent housing survey commissioned by the municipality. The Greenstone gold mine, which is nearly complete, is a major factor driving the increase in demand. 200 to 300 new residencies are needed to meet that demand, and Greenstone Mayor James McPherson says housing is a huge need and will require a multi-pronged solution.
Certainly, how do we move forward is going to be the challenge. We've got to look at different partnerships with other organizations, with the Thunder Bay home builders here in Thunder Bay, see what they can do to help, speak with developers, work on our web page to make sure that people can find the properties that we do have vacant that could be built on, and then to work with the groups like the Thunder Bay District Social Services Administration Board on how they can work with us and the different housing corporations in Greenstone to make opportunities available.
One option being considered by council is the possible construction of municipally owned housing. The bulk of the new homes are expected to be centered in and around Geraldton near the mine. There was a groundbreaking ceremony in Rainy River on Wednesday for the construction of a brand new school and child care center. The province committed more than $30 million to the project. It's part of the plan to invest upwards of $15 billion over the next decade into schools across Ontario. Provincial ministries were on hand for the groundbreaking on the new Rainy River facility, which will go from JK to grade 12.
I think it's the kind of asset that will attract families. This is a community on the rise. It serves a vast district.
This project wouldn't have been achieved if not for the advocacy of your NPP. Greg Rickford fought hard to make sure that funding flowed outside of the GTA into this part of Ontario that has been, perhaps for many may say, left behind from some of those critical investments. And I know between housing and infrastructure and education, we're on a roll right now in the Northwest.
The school will be equipped for more than 300 students and offer 39 low-cost childcare spaces to the community. More than halfway into the year, Nipissing Council is set to pass its operating budget by August 1st. They're looking at a 3% tax rate increase. Council directed administration to prepare a budget based on the 3% tax hike, which for homeowners should amount to a $75 a year increase on average. Nipissing Mayor Suzanne Kuko says the increase is needed to adjust for increasing costs, but that the overall township finances are in good shape.
You know, we've got a good solid tax base, we've got a good commercial tax base, which we really appreciate. Not every small municipality in Northwestern Ontario has that, so we're very lucky. And we have some great future prospects as well for commercial and, you know, new builds and things like that. So our operating budget is very healthy. We're very happy about that, and it's the future is looking bright for Nipigon.
A $1.2 million capital budget was passed in the spring, and KUKO hopes to get the operating budget passed as soon as possible in order to get tax bills sent out. With most council members serving their first terms, she says the education needed has delayed the budget process, and she expects it to go much faster next year. The Thunder Bay Health Unit is now on the lookout for additional tick-borne illnesses over and above Lyme disease. Doctors and other healthcare professionals here in the Northwest now had to report cases of 3 other diseases transmitted by ticks to the Medical Officer of Health. Joe Sadowski explains.
As of July the 1st, the Ministry of Health requires district health units to track these new viruses transmitted by black-legged ticks: the Powassan virus, anaplasmosis, and babesiosis. They're diseases that are more commonly found in areas after a spike in Lyme disease. Public Health Inspector Matt Bradica says Lyme disease cases are now spiking in Ontario, and the province fears that there could be an uptick in these other diseases as well.
So the reason why the province is now concerned with monitoring these particular diseases is because they've been looking at what's going on in the United States. And they've been seeing that in the Mideastern states, as well as like northeastern states like New York and Connecticut. They've been seeing a wave of these diseases, so anaplasmosis, babesiosis, and Powassan virus.
Ticks are nothing new in the region, but due to climate change, black-legged ticks can now survive more easily year-round and establish breeding populations.
It's going to become more common. This is because as a result of climate change, the winters are on average becoming warmer, and so these warmer winters, provide an opportunity for these black-legged ticks to survive and expand their area, expand their range within Ontario.
The best way to avoid tick-borne diseases is to take the proper precautions to avoid being bitten.
We also recommend, wearing an insect repellent that contains either DEET or a keratin. As well, it's important that after you come indoors to do a thorough tick check of your body.
As of today, there hasn't been any documented case of any of these new tick-borne viruses here in the Northwest, but healthcare experts still advise to take all of the necessary precautions when going outdoors. Joe Sadowski, TBT News.
Stay tuned for the latest outlook on wildland fires in the region. Welcome back. Despite some recent rain and more in the forecast, there's still no plan to lift the fire ban that's been in place in our region for more than a month. As of Friday afternoon, there were 62 active fires across the Northwest, including 11 that weren't yet under control. Fire Information Officer Allison Bazubiak says none of the fires were threatening communities at the time, and while 4 wildfires were put out, there are still concerns about dry ground conditions and lighting.
Forest fuels are still very dry and susceptible to holdover ignition from lightning and could result in more problematic fire behavior. Scattered precipitation is often accompanied by lightning, which can strike a tree or other forest fuels and ignite a fire under the forest floor. Once the weather dries up, winds can increase, temperatures can rebound, and holdover lightning fires from convective activity can appear up to about a week later.
The fire hazard level has been reduced to moderate across much of the region, but is still high to extreme in some areas, including around Thunder Bay and near the southern Manitoba border. Medical professionals have to weigh the ethics of their decisions every day. For dozens of hospitals and clinics in the region, the Lakehead University Center for Healthcare Ethics can provide guidance in making some of those more difficult choices. The center is marking its 25th anniversary with a visit to the region. Lee Noonan has more.
A dozen of the region's hospitals, as well as several long-term care homes and other service providers, are partnered with the Lakehead University Center for Healthcare Ethics, sharing a bioethicist, Ryan Tonkins, who is touring some of the hospitals to the east of the region as part of the center's 25th anniversary celebrations.
Ethics is something that I think healthcare professionals confront every day.
Smaller northern hospitals would never have the resources to retain their own bioethicist, says Nipigon Hospital's CEO, Kathy Eady.
The thing about ethics is there's no right or wrong answer, and there's no, the bioethicist isn't going to be the ethics police and tell you this is the decision you should make, but they just help to facilitate the discussions a little bit more.
While in Nipigon, Tonkins is touring the hospital and meeting with staff and management to discuss some of the ethical questions they wrestle with on the job.
We might have, say, a patient or a resident in LTC who we think is making a poor choice or is maybe doing things that are harmful to them. There might be questions about the extent to which the resident has capacity to consent or the extent to which they understand what they're doing and are doing so knowingly and willingly.
According to both Tonkins and Eady, small hospitals like Nipigon face unique ethical challenges you might not encounter in a city.
We're their neighbors. You live down the street, they know your family. We talked a lot about the privacy piece of that, but also keeping that therapeutic boundary when they are your neighbors and they're asking how your mom's doing and they know your family, etc.
Someone doing many roles or there's fewer resources available, and sometimes not having the resources means that the ethical issues become much more pronounced because the right answer might involve more money or more space or more staff, but we don't have that available to us.
For patients and their families, Tonkins says it's important to understand that in Canada, ethics guidelines prioritize patient autonomy.
It's kind of like watching a close relative marrying what you think is the wrong person. Any decision that we think is high risk or something that the person shouldn't be doing, but they're expressing their own autonomy and self-determination, so they ought to be able to make that decision for themselves, as long as they're not harming anyone, I would say.
Lee Noonan, TBT News.
The artists and designers for next year's Indigenous Fashion Arts Festival have been named, and there's strong representation from Northwestern Ontario. Celios Bellos reports.
Multiple artists from Northwestern Ontario are among the 28 who got invited to next year's Indigenous Fashion Arts Festival.
This is my second time, and I can't believe I'm asked again. They're going to let me in.
Michelle Dumont, a member of the Red Rock Indian Band, was one of the 4 artists or designers from our region whose work will be featured. Dumont has seen incredible success in the industry with his use of unconventional materials like tape, even being talked about in Vogue magazine. Dumont says one of the most exciting parts of the event is having the shared experience with Indigenous peoples from around the world.
We all have, these familiar connections to the land, and it's remarkable the similarities. Like, they had their, many aunties looking out for them. just like I had my aunties looking out for me. And so it's just remarkable to be in that situation.
The invite just solidifies all the work that I have been putting in over the years.
Janelle Walwia is a self-taught artist, also hailing from Red Rock Indian Band, already attending the festival multiple times before. Walwia is known for sewing custom fur garments and accessories, and says she's already working on the pieces that will be featured in Toronto next year.
I feel the excitement already starting, like with me with my designs, um, starting items, beading items, different things that I'm doing for the fashion week. But I can't wait to see other designers and just feel the whole experience again.
The 2024 Indigenous Fashion Arts Festival is happening in May at the Art Gallery of Toronto. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
And that's all the time we have for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you right back here next week.